It is my pleasure to welcome you to this video lecture, Analysis of Qualitative Interviews and Group Discussions. Here, I would like to give you a step-by-step guide how you analyze data that you gathered through qualitative interviews or group discussions, then form a theory or develop a theory or a model out of your findings, your results, and how you can report these findings. I have also published this step-by-step guide, but unfortunately I've published this only in German. At the moment, and actually since a few years, I'm based in Germany, so the publisher asked me to write the German book Qualitative Research for Dummies. Until now, I'm unfortunately not asked to write the English version. I hope that I can in the future bring more qualitative research papers or textbooks out, which are then in English. Until now, you have to make do with this book. And what I'm showing you here is the 13th chapter of the German version of Qualitative Research for Dummies. Before I come to the step-by-step guide, how you analyze qualitative interviews or group discussions, I would like to go back to the basics. That is good advice quite often in life, and here it holds true especially. What is the epistemic goal of qualitative research? Normally, what you want to do is you want to comprehensively examine the experiences of people with regard to a specific situation and or a specific object. So in a specific context, you want to find out what are the experiences people have. And you're doing this not as a lovely pastime, you're doing this with an objective in mind. And that is based on the experiences of people. You want to explain their thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. And then, based on these thoughts, emotions, and behaviors that you get from specific people with regard to specific contexts, you want to develop a theory or a model so that you have a generalized explanation of why, how, to what end people behave, feel, and think. Keep this epistemic goal of qualitative research in mind, because the guide, the step-by-step guide for analyzing qualitative interviews and group discussions, is directed to this goal. The step-by-step guide, as it says, is a very hands-on application-oriented guide, and I said this before, how to analyze qualitative data, how to develop a model out of these, and how to report the results. In total, there are 4 phases and 9 steps. This guide I've developed shows similarities to the qualitative content analysis according to Cookhart's. But it is not only Cookhart's that I'm based this method on. You find also roots in the grounded theory methodology, and here I recommend the book of Strauss and Corbin from 1996, Basics of Qualitative Research, Techniques for Developing Grounded Theory. Use the 1996 version, not a later edition. There are some changes that I do not understand, and I do not think they improved the grounded theory methodology approach. Furthermore, these 2 sources might help you if you write your own research paper and you do not only want to have a German source, my Qualitative Research for Dummies book, you can also refer, apart from my publication, to these 2. The 4 phases of this guide are the preparatory steps, then the actual analysis, your coding and developing your category system. Out of this, or on this basis, you will develop the model, and then you have to report the results and findings in a research paper. Now, I go through all of these steps and also would like to exemplify these with a publication. Let's start with the preparatory steps. The first step in this phase is defining the analytic frame on the basis of theory, research questions, and interview guideline. Secondly, you need to describe your interview recordings. So have a look back. Where are you coming from? Normally you can use the research questions that you have developed in advance. So what is the objective of your research? That is the research questions. So there is where you are heading. Have this as a basis, make yourself acquainted or reacquainted with these. Furthermore, you have your interview guideline. The answers to the questions in the interview guideline should answer your research questions. So the interview guideline comes from the research questions. Look at this again before you go to the actual analysis. And it might be not of harm if you check your theory out of which you developed your research questions and your interview guideline. Very important here is theoretical sensitivity. That is a term that is used in qualitative research and refers to the openness to different theoretical explanations. In qualitative research, think back on the epistemic goal. You want to develop new theories, new models, and there you cannot go in narrowly with a narrow perspective, only looking at one theory or one theory direction. So you need to be open and you need to have more theoretical explanations in mind and let them come up. The second step, the transcription. So never approach qualitative research in a way, oh, I'm a people's person, I have a good feeling for people, just talk to them and then I know what's going on. Never do this. You might be definitely wrong and you miss out on the nuances that lie behind the statements or lie within the statements, sort of reading between the lines. So you need a transcription, a word-to-word transcription of your qualitative interviews or group discussions. So you need to decide for rather complex or rather simple transcription. A rather complex transcription would include the non-verbal elements, pauses, the voices going up or down, the facial expression, and such things. Here the advice is normally use a rather simple one. The more complex your transcription is, the more complex and harder, more challenging will be your analysis. And normally then, if things are too complex, things go south. Simple transcription, but this transcription must include all verbal or non-verbal expressions that are relevant for your research project. In most projects, it's fair enough to just have the recordings of your interviews, transcribe them, and it's happy days. But double check if you perhaps need non-verbal expressions and other means of expression. Normally you don't. Now let me give you an example which follows us through this video lecture, and it comes from a publication that is not out yet. Apologies again, but there are a few hiccups, if you will, a few wrinkles need ironing out in the theory section, but it should be out fairly soon. Co-author and I examined the subjective decision-making and reasoning in moral dilemma situations. And we used the primal academic dilemma, that is the trolley dilemma. Perhaps you've heard of this. There's a runaway trolley that goes down the tracks and is not controllable. If it goes down the tracks and nothing happens, it will run over 5 track workers, and they will be dead. Now, imagine you standing on a lever, and you can bring or direct the train on a side track. Then these 5 workers are saved, but on the sidetrack there's one worker and he will be killed. This is researched quite well from a quantitative perspective, and from psychology and philosophy it is said they are utilitarian and deontological decisions. A utilitarian decision would be pulling the lever, meaning the trolley goes or is directed to the sidetrack. A utilitarian decision means you maximize the utility for a maximum number of people. On the other hand, if you do not switch the lever or push the lever, then you have a deontological decision, and that means you're focusing on the rules and the individual rights and duties of the individual people. Now, my co-author and I said, we do not think that people actually think in such terms like utilitarian decision, deontological decision. Yes, I pull the lever because I'm a very utilitarian person, or I don't touch it because I have a deontological mindset. No, probably people don't think this way. And I can confirm from the interviews we've conducted, they don't. So we ask ourselves, what are the actual subjective reasons for and against such a moral dilemma decision, for a utilitarian or for a deontological decision? Furthermore, this is a dilemma, and then more likely or not, you will have inner psychological conflicts. So how are people dealing with these conflicts? Finally, how are people applying utilitarian or deontological decision-making in the real life? We'll come back to this, and the analysis and steps, what you're doing, I'll explain by using this example. Now, let's go to the second phase of the analysis of qualitative interviews or group discussions. You have 3 steps. You want to familiarize yourself with the transcripts. Then you need to derive the deductive categories from theory, research questions, and interview guideline. And the third step in this phase is the actual coding. Apply the deductive categories or codes to your transcript and develop and apply the inductive categories, so that in the end you can develop a category system. Normally that is an hierarchical system. So the first step, you can understand this against the backdrop of qualitative statistics, qualitative analysis. You want to understand, comprehensively understand the world of people, the normal world of people, and therefore you need to have the whole in your perspective and understand the whole, and you need to understand the several parts of it. So first, get an overview. Understand the overall picture. You shouldn't say this in academia and research, but sort of get a feeling for the data. Then you derive the deductive categories. Deductive categories are categories that you can set up before you do the actual analysis on the transcripts. So you know from theory and from research questions and from the interview guideline, what categories will I use to code my text? Set them up first, and then you get on with the actual coding. You bring in the deductive categories, and that is assigning your categories to the parts of the transcript. That might be words, statements, sentences. And then there's the inductive coding. For theory development, you necessarily need inductive coding. You're going through the transcripts line by line, and then you develop the categories out of the text and assign these categories to the text parts. And here it is important that these categories are abstract enough to form a theory, or develop a theory. You need to be in a more generalized level, not on the level of one specific person. But on the same time, the categories must be concrete or specific enough to represent the subjective life world of the participants. When you're doing such an analysis, you rather win the lottery. Then you go through your text and it works out the first time you go through and everything is coded. That normally never happens. So what you do, you need to, after regular times, you need to refine your inductive categories and develop your hierarchical category system further and need to adjust this. So constantly you need to adjust, reassess and adjust the categories you've formed with regard to their explanatory and discriminatory power. Explanatory, what can they explain? Discriminatory, are there actually two categories? Are they the same or are they actually different? Check this regularly. And then to get to an hierarchical category system, which is the right choice more often than not, you need to assign your inductive categories, which are normally very specific on a very concrete level, to higher categories, and these quite often are deductive categories. Now, this is all very abstract what I'm telling you. Perhaps it becomes clear what deductive and inductive coding and categories are with the example of the moral dilemma project. So, one of our research objectives was to find the subjective reasons for utilitarian and for deontological decisions. So we have two deductive categories. We could deduce them from theory and our research questions. Reasons for utilitarian decisions and reasons for deontological decisions. The subordinated categories, they are inductively formed out of the text, out of the answers of our participants. There might be situation or decision related reasons. There might be reasons for utilitarian decision that are based on the values that a person has. And there might be the reasons for utilitarian decision might be based in the belief in the fate or in God, so that the own actions are determined by fate or by God. And then we also have further subordinated categories under these. For the deontological decisions, we could find a similar structure, bit different nuances, but a similar structure, again inductively. Situation and decision related reasons, value-based reasons, and here you see a slight difference. It is on the God-fate related reasons. It is for deontological decisions. Our participants said, I'm not allowed to interfere with the course of events which are determined by God, or some said by fate. And we had another category here we found inductively. I do not want to be involved whatsoever because I'm indifferent toward people. So I hope this could make you clear what are deductive and what are inductive categories. And here you see the overall or parts of the overall category system, and you see it goes quite far. It's an hierarchical system. There we were just here, reasons for utilitarian decisions, situation, decision related reasons. It goes deeper, one level, 5 persons are more than one person less than 5. And even there we have subordinated categories. Then again, a category that belongs to the superior category, or the main category, situations and decision-based or related reasons. People wanted to reduce their guilt by choosing the lesser evil. And in other words, it is a reflexive, it's a gut instinct action that is based on common sense. And this goes on through the other categories as well. So you see, you can find quite a few categories and bring them into an hierarchical model. At this point, this is a rather complex and demanding research project. If you're writing a bachelor or master thesis, possibly even a doctoral thesis, there might be the chance that you do not need to have to go as deep in your hierarchical category system as my co-author and I did here. And you can see this is not all the category system, and our project went further. Now, the next phase, the third phase, is the model development. Here you have two steps. You might, not in every case, but in a few cases, you might analyze the context of the categories. And then you need to derive your model, your theory, from your category system and the context of categories. The first step, analyzing the context of categories. Sometimes that is already sorted and done through the analysis process, but not always. You should ask yourself, in which context do my categories appear? And there the questions: who says something? When does a person say this? Where does a person say this? How does a person say this? And why does a person say this? Or, of course, does this? That might help you. And as I said, perhaps the context is already integrated in your category system that you've developed in your analysis phase, in your coding phase. But in doubt, apply this again to be on the, or apply this analyzing the context of categories to be on the safe side. Now you have everything together. You have your hierarchical system of categories, and you have the context when these categories appear or are set or are done. Then derive the theoretical model from this category system and, if applicable, the context of categories. Possibly slightly simplifying, but you will normally, in 99%, you are on the right track there. You can distinguish between a static phenomenon that you examine or a dynamic phenomenon. If you have a static phenomenon, then your hierarchical category system might be already the model you want to develop. In a dynamic context, a dynamic phenomenon, then you would need to develop a network model that shows what is the cause, what is the effect, to what leads this effect, and so forth. I will show you the example of the model we have developed in our moral dilemma project, but I will do this after I elaborated on the fourth phase of the analysis, the result reporting in your research paper. Here you have to report your categories and the model you have developed. Reporting the categories, the objective is that the reader can comprehend the categories on a theoretical level. Of course, you want to develop a theory, in other words, a model. So, on a rather abstract level, the reader should understand what are these categories. But your categories are based in the life worlds of normal people, of your participants. Therefore, the reader must also understand the subjective world of the participants, which are reflected in the categories. And that is a really fine line, and it's not too easy to balance the abstract theory part and the specific concrete subjective world part out. How should you report your categories? I recommend they should have a clear label or a name for the, you should have a clear label or name for the category. You should have a theoretical definition and characterization of the category, and then you give a quote from the transcript as a specific example. And through these two aspects, theoretical definition and a quote, you mirror your objectives. You give a theoretical understanding and you give an understanding. Again, you shouldn't say this in academia and research. You give a feeling of how the world looks like. Now, reporting your model that you've developed out of your category. The reader should understand this. That is your objective. And therefore, normally it's a very good idea to have a graphical model. But you also need to explain this model in your text. Not just, oh, here's the model and that's it. No, you state in your text, out of these categories in this and that way, we develop this model which is represented in figure X, and then you show figure X with the model and then you describe it. But let me show you the examples which make how to report your categories and your developed model clear, or hopefully quite clear. Let's go on with the example. Here is how you can report a category. And this is from our project, the category when dealing with inner conflicts after a moral dilemma decision. It's the category hoping for understanding and forgiveness. What we wrote is an aspect of dealing with the inner conflict after the decision in a moral dilemma decision can be the hope that others understand the decision and that the bereaved can forgive the actions taken. E.g., naturally, the forgiveness and understanding of the bereaved is important to me. And that is a quote from one of the transcripts. Now, how could a model look like? And again, as said, this moral dilemma project is a rather complex one. So our main model is this. And I would like to go through this briefly, but hopefully I can make it clear. So here in the center, we have the moral dilemma decision, a utilitarian or a deontological decision. I pull the lever and save the 5 workers. I do not pull the lever, deontological decision, and the 5 workers are killed, and the one on the sidetrack survives. Now, there are 2 paths that you can come to this decision. One is, I believe in God or in fate. Therefore, I have values, and my belief in God and the values lead to a rather extensive decision, or I have lots of thoughts and thinking about this, or an automated decision, sort of common sense gut feeling. And that brings me to the actual decision. But we could also find that people make the decision and then in hindsight they justified their decision, sort of, oh, now I did this, what is best for me, and now I need a valid reason why I did this, and they moved back to value-based reasons and reasons that lie in God or some sort of fate. Well, we also find out, and we were not expecting this, that there are additional factors. Not by asking after these, but the participants, and I believe, if my memory doesn't fail me, nearly all of them came up, yeah, I must need more about the people. That will make a massive difference. So, what is the value of the people that are affected? Are they criminals? Are they good people? Do they have a long life ahead of themselves? All these things play a role. And if there's an emotional relationship, participants told us, yeah, if this is my father or my mother or my beloved partner, I would decide completely differently. Then after the decision, it comes to conflicts, inner conflicts, how to deal with them. And there, people are questioning the situation and the decision in a rather rationalizing way, or they're emphasizing on their intuition, on their gut feeling. And then when they're questioning the decision that is the precondition for either accepting guilt or accepting responsibility and guilt, relativizing responsibility and guilt. Someone else is responsible. What do I have to do? I'm just a passerby. Or even externalizing responsibility and guilt. What are even these 5 workers are doing there? It's their own problem. And that is our main model, how to explain how people come to moral dilemma decisions and how they're dealing with inner conflicts afterwards. And we even went further and distinguished between utilitarian and deontological decisions. I do not want to go all of the points here. There you should wait or look for the publication if you're interested in this in more detail. I hope I could give you an understanding and explain this a step-by-step guide how you can analyze qualitative interviews. I say thank you for your attention, and more importantly, I wish you all the best and lots of success for your own qualitative research project. Bye bye for now.